In the long and painful unraveling of Drew's judgment, one decision came to symbolize everything broken between him, Sam, and the people who loved their children: Westwood Academy. On paper, the school was a dream: impeccable credentials, a manicured campus, a network of power and privilege that promised to open doors before Scout was even old enough to understand which doors were being shut behind her. To Drew, it was a solution, an armor of prestige he could wrap around his daughter so no one could ever dismiss, control, or discard her the way he had once felt discarded himself. But beneath the glossy brochures, his choice carried something darker. It was less about what Scout needed and more about what Drew needed to prove. That is where the fracture began to glow red hot. Scout had already built a life in Port Charles, small and ordinary in the ways that actually matter. She liked her classroom that still smelled faintly of markers and old paper, the hallway where she knew every face, the cafeteria table where the noise was too loud but familiar, the teachers who encouraged her curiosity instead of packaging her potential into a marketing tagline for a brochure. She loved being close to the people who made up her world: her mother, her brother, her grandmother, the tangle of extended family who could show up in 10 minutes with hugs, hot chocolate, or blunt advice. In that chaos, there was safety. In that closeness, there was identity. When Drew looked at her, though, he saw danger where she saw home. He saw influences he did not control, loyalties he could not curate, a narrative about Jason and the Corinthos-adjacent universe that he could not rewrite to his liking as long as Scout was still fully immersed in it. So Westwood became not just a school, but a weapon. A strategy. A line in the sand. And once he drew it, he refused to step back. There was something particularly brutal about the way his determination cut through the simplest truth: Scout did not want to go. Children's wishes might be dismissed as naive, impulsive, short-sighted, but the clarity in Scout's refusal was not whimsical. It came from instinct, the same instinct that lets a child know when a room is suddenly colder even if all the doors are shut. She knew that Westwood meant distance. New uniforms, a different schedule, new rules, that part could have been exciting. But what she felt instead was subtraction. Fewer afternoons with the people she loved, fewer spontaneous visits to see her grandmother, fewer chances to be side by side with Danny, the brother who had become both anchor and co-conspirator in navigating their messy, complicated family legacy. She understood in a way Drew refused to that separation was not just about geography. It was about the quiet message that her life in Port Charles, her connections, her emotional roots, were somehow not good enough. That she needed to be upgraded. Corrected. Curated. In trying to shape her future, Drew was, without saying it out loud, rejecting her present. And children, far more than adults, hear what is not spoken. The bond between Danny and Scout had already been tested by grief, secrets, and the ever-shifting loyalties of adults who made promises they couldn't always keep. They were siblings in the truest sense, not just by blood, but forged through late-night worries, shared suspicions, the unspoken fear that any day could bring another explosive revelation that changed everything they thought they knew about their parents. They clung to each other because stability was rare, and trust was fragile. In that fragile space, Drew's plan felt like a deliberate fracture. For them, togetherness was not optional. It was survival. Tearing Scout away from her brother, even under the honorable banner of opportunity, was an act that exposed how deeply Drew had started confusing control with love. He could talk about providing the best, about sacrifice, about preparing her for a ruthless world, but the people watching from the outside saw something harsher. A man using his child as a platform for his unresolved rivalry, his wounded pride, his desperate need to rewrite his story as the one who rose above everyone who had doubted him. In that obsession, he was willing to let a little girl pay the cost. Sam saw it for what it was long before anyone else dared to say it aloud. She had walked through too many storms not to recognize the chill when it crept in. For years, she had been placed in impossible positions, forced to negotiate with danger, betrayal, and men who loved intensely but often recklessly. This time, the threat did not come from a gun, a blackmail scheme, or a mob rival. It came wrapped in the polite language of academic excellence and doing what's best. It came from someone who should have known Scout's heart as well as she did. Sam understood that there is a difference between giving a child more and tearing a child away. Westwood did not feel like a gift. It felt like exile. An exile was not something she would let her daughter be sentenced to without a fight. So she pushed back, not with theatrics, but with resolve sharpened by every mistake she had ever made, every compromise she had ever regretted. She would not let Scout become an accessory in Drew's war with shadows. She would not let him turn parenting into punishment. If that meant standing in his way, then she was willing to be the barrier he could not bulldoze. What made Drew's choices sting even more was the cruelty of their precision. Keeping Scout away from her extended family was not an accidental byproduct of a transfer to a better school, it was central to his strategy. He knew how strong those bonds were, how much Monica's steady love meant, how grounding it was for Scout to have a grandmother's gentle wisdom to balance the chaos of everything else. He knew how vital it was for her to spend ordinary time with her brother, to see her aunt, to grow up surrounded by people who knew her history and loved her anyway. Removing that network did not protect Scout, it isolated her. Isolation is a quiet kind of violence, wrapped in just enough justification to sound reasonable. But it is still violence. It undermines the confidence of a child who begins to wonder why the people she loves keep being labeled as dangers, obstacles, bad influences. It teaches her that love comes with conditions and that safety means obedience to one person's narrative. It makes her more dependent on the very voice that is silencing all the others. Whether Drew admitted it to himself or not, that is what he was building. A world where Scout's life rotated around his sense of injury and his need to be right. For observers, especially those who had already taken their own journeys with Sam, it became impossible not to see the contrast. Sam had never been perfect, and the audience had watched every misstep. But something had changed in her over the years. Her choices increasingly bent toward one central truth: her children could not be collateral damage anymore. Her resistance to Westwood was not stubborn pride, not a refusal to accept something better out of spite. It was a conscious act of protection, a refusal to let her daughter become emotionally exiled under the guise of an elite education. Sam understood that opportunity that demands a child sever her emotional lifelines is no opportunity at all. She stood between Scout and the narrative Drew was crafting, insisting that her daughter's emotional well-being mattered more than his need to win some invisible contest with the past. That strength, hard-won, quiet, and unyielding, became one of the few hopeful anchors in a storyline where so many adults seemed willing to bend their morals, their loyalties, their clarity for ego or revenge. The absence of Sam on screen created its own kind of dissonance. The character's presence lingered like a missing heartbeat, felt most sharply in the moments where Scout's vulnerability was exposed. Every time Drew's control tightened, every time another choice was made without genuine regard for what Scout wanted or needed, viewers could feel the hollow space where Sam should have been. The voice reminding him who this was really about, the arms Scout could run into without condition. That tension between what the character represented and what the story allowed played out in the subtext. Fans did not simply want nostalgia, they wanted justice, for the woman who had clawed her way toward a better version of herself, and for the children whose lives carried the weight of choices they never made. The hope for Sam's return was never just about seeing a familiar face again. It was about restoring a moral axis to a storyline sliding too comfortably into cruelty disguised as concern. In that sense, the conflict around Westwood Academy became emblematic of something larger in Port Charles. The eternal battle between those who think love is proven by control and those who know love is proven by protection, even when that means saying no to the person standing right in front of you. Drew's stubbornness, his refusal to hear his own daughter's fear, exposed a rot that had nothing to do with villainous outsiders and everything to do with what happens when pain curdles into entitlement. He believed he was building a fortress for Scout. In reality, he was building a wall between her and the very people who could help her grow into someone whole. Sam, whether physically present or not, became the counterpoint, the reminder that a parent's duty is not to win, not to punish, not to isolate, but to listen, even when the voice speaking is small, unsure, and inconvenient to adult plans. The story, as it stands, is not simply about a school choice or a custody disagreement. It is a warning dressed up as domestic drama. It asks what happens when a father starts using opportunity as leverage, when a child's future is commandeered to soothe an old grudge, when extended family, flawed but loving, are recast as threats because they do not fit the narrative of one man's wounded pride. It challenges the audience to look beyond glossy rationalizations and ask who is actually safer, who is actually heard, when decisions are made on their behalf. It invites outrage, not for spectacle but for clarity. There is nothing noble about sacrificing a child's emotional world to settle scores. And so, between the lines, the path forward becomes clear. Port Charles has always thrived on redemption arcs, but redemption is never automatic. If Drew is to find his humanity again, it will not be through scholarships, endowments, or deals struck in shadowed rooms. It will begin the moment he admits that he treated his daughter like proof instead of a person. It will begin when he understands that greatness is not bestowed by elite hallways, but nurtured by the messy, imperfect, loyal people who stand by a child even when the world falls apart. Until then, the heart of this story belongs not to him, but to the girl who wanted to stay, to the brother who needed her beside him, and to the mother whose love, whether on screen or not, refuses to let them be silently erased to accommodate someone else's ambition.